Hello, everybody. My name is Ilona Baumane-Vītoliņa. I am Associated Professor at the University of Latvia, Faculty of Business Economics and Management. And I am very happy to present you our webinar series on managing uncertainty, perspectives from theory and practice. And today is the second webinar from those series, and we will discuss issues of international business environment and success and failure of the firm. And I am very glad that we have delighted discussants today, and we have a keynote speaker. And now we will start with a keynote, and I will also kindly ask the audience to make this webinar interactive, so you can pose your questions in a chat, or if you are watching it from the Facebook live streaming, then you also can address your questions. Okay, so I will give the floor to Peter Zettinig, who is a professor at the Turku University, and he will present his view on business internationalization, and then we will start discussion, and I then will introduce our discussants, our panel. So please, Peter, floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. I just cannot put my video on because the host has a, okay, now maybe, now you can see me. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me here. It's a great pleasure to be with you, and I will share my screen with you to guide a little bit the keynote that I was preparing for the next 50 minutes or so. The topic which we agreed on is dealing with international companies, multinational firms, and how they define or how their success and their failure is determined, and how the environment, the international business environment is changing, and what does this mean? And that should then bridge to our discussion group, discussion round. And Ilona has prepared a few very interesting questions which will be related to this presentation that I have prepared. So where are we in this webinar series? Well, first of all, my name is Peter Zettinig, and thank you, Ilona, for introducing me. My field of research and my field of study is in international business. So it's dealing very much with strategy topics, global business environment, how it's changing, and then also how this affects the work environment of organizations. And in this webinar series, my presentation and the topic of today fits in between the ecosystem level perspective that Trine was introducing a week ago, and touches mainly on the organizational level from a very strategic international business perspective. And if we look ahead 1 week from now, Anita will have the third part of this series, and she's looking into individual level human resource management related questions. So I think Ilona and her colleagues have put a very nice package together, which should give us a lot of interesting material for discussion. Okay, so what are the guiding questions that I would like to touch upon briefly in the next few minutes? Basically, at the center, at the focus of this is the firm, and the firm's success or the firm's failure, and how it relates to ever-changing dynamic international business environment. So I would like to start with a little bit a short discussion about how we typically explain on a very parsimonious level multinationals' success and failure. What are the factors? How do they come together, and how do they form the multinational advantage, if you want? And then look into some of the changes that has happened over the last decade or so, and ponder upon what does this mean to this original framework that I present, and then pass on these questions to our panelists who have very specific perspectives on these questions, I'm pretty sure. All right. So if we look at the very traditional explanation in the success of the multinational company, we typically have three factors that we try to investigate. And one is called ownership specific advantages. It goes back to more than half a century of research in international business and in multinational companies. Goes back to an economist whose name was John Dunning, who discovered productivity differences in firms. And he found out that these productivity differences in firms were actually based on the owner's advantage rather than the location-specific factors that surround them. So he looked originally into English manufacturing companies and found out that those manufacturing companies which were owned by American owners were actually more productive than those by British owners, which is very counterintuitive if you think all the location-specific questions you need to respond to, all the additional transaction costs you have to overcome. And that formed the beginning of this kind of thinking that firms have specific advantages. And if these specific advantages are transferable, so typically we talk about intangible things, then they can create a higher value by either reducing costs or increasing revenue. So that's quite a fundamental idea here. So, and the idea is that multinationals had to have enough of these firm-specific advantages that they transfer to new international locations to overcome the additional costs of being foreigner, not knowing the market so well, to have coordination over distance and many other of these difficulties that create costs. And if we look at the typical examples or the typical classes of firm-specific advantages, then we have three that are very interesting. And of course, the first one is maybe one very critical one, because it really is the one which creates monopolistic advantages. And I don't mean monopolistic advantage in the very traditional sense, like that a state grants one company to run the railways of the country, but more like monopolistic advantages that are created and not given. So this might be, for instance, if a company holds patents or possesses very strong brands, they can create monopolistic advantages. So other firms cannot use that advantage, cannot replicate it easily, and thus they create an economic advantage out of this. The other two classes are equally important. And if we look into technology, it's maybe besides the product of technology, the ability to produce technology, to create innovations, to bring new solutions to markets, to commercialize these. And then the third class is economies of large size, so a very classic economic kind of thing, economies of scale, scope, and other things that create similar effects. So the bigger I am, the more likely I will have a falling average unit cost, and that will give me an enormous advantage when I internationalize. So this is the first and a very important standard thing. And companies who have these firm-specific advantages, which are mobile and transferable, have been found or has been found to be one of the major explanations for multinational success. And of course, this has to be seen in line with the next one, which is location advantages. So multinationals, they choose locations where they transfer their own advantages, and then they pair and leverage them against advantages found in these locations. So it creates a kind of a leverage effect by, for instance, alongside these three examples that I have listed here, economic advantages, that's a very classic one. So that's if we look at German companies in the 1990s choosing to relocate production to China in different industries to basically transfer their understanding, their technology, their patents to a location where factors of production were at that time extremely favorable. And by combining two very strong arguments, creating a competitive advantage overall, both on a very strong, big market population-wise, and one that is growing enormously fast, plus then as a location from which to export the products and export them even back to the home market. So these kind of economic advantages are very, very clear. Factors of production, very often very illustrative, is labor costs. On the other side, we have a market size on the demand side. And then we have things like, for instance, infrastructures, productivity, and there are better places than others to do certain things, economically more advantages. If we look at the second one, political advantages, these are trade locations we have seen in the last 25 years. Like even, I'm at the moment in Finland, I'm Austrian by nationality. So in the last 25 years, we have seen in Europe, the European Union creating large single markets with very few restrictions on trading and with very low barriers, and then emphasize that also by extinguishing currency costs largely across many different countries. So this creates kind of a political advantages that then create very favorable positions for trade. On the other side, we see that countries are competing with each other, and there are FDI subsidiaries and specific policies that lure in multinationals, because there is very good evidence that having multinationals in your own trade environment, in your own environment, creates a lot of positive spillover effects. Some of them are very obvious. If we have inland revenue, tax revenues, and those kind of things, employment, but then also more subliminal ones like knowledge spillover effects and things that, for instance, lead to the creation of clusters and those kind of things, clusters and ecosystems. And then we have the third class here, which is very interesting and very specific for some locations. And those can be summarized maybe as a good place to do something specific, and there's a list of different reasons which might contribute to this, but maybe a very good example everybody can probably envision is if we think about where would you make a blockbuster movie, and we would immediately think, okay, there are some locations in the world which are better suited, which have more of this kind of a social, cultural, and supporting industry advantages where we find these. We would go to Hollywood, or we would go to Bollywood, or we would go for some specific movies to New Zealand, where we create this type of movies. So these location advantages are very interesting. And just to reiterate this, that firms transfer their firm-specific advantages internationally, leverage them with what they find locally alongside these classes, and that create a very strong competitive advantage for these firms. And that, of course, is not the whole story, because a major question is, besides this very strategic point of view on how to align these advantages, the question is, of course, also how to do this. And if we think about this, then we talk about traditionally from an economist point of view about internalization. So putting things, creating or internalizing operations, assets, management of different resources inside the organization. And if we look traditionally, this has happened for multinational companies, typically by creating equity-based modes, like creating their own subsidiaries in countries, buying other companies in different markets, and getting a fast access where they can keep full control over their foreign operations. And that, of course, is very important in order to govern their internationalization, their international operations, and govern also the value creation in the leverage between firm-specific and location-specific advantages. And here in between these two, non-equity and equity modes, we have this very colorful class that we very often refer to as strategic alliances, which can be contractual based or can be based on different ownership governance structures or combination of both. And these have been gaining a lot more importance in the last 20, 30 years, I would say. And if we align this with the topic of last week, ecosystems, then these definitely play the most prominent role, especially if we look into developing new technologies, developing new business models, and those kind of things. So these three factors together has served us very well for a long time to explain why certain companies, here just a list of things, list of companies. Why have they become so big or so profitable, or why are they so powerful, efficient, or whatever you want to whatever you want to classify them as. So these three explanations have given us a parsimonious and still quite comprehensive explanation why multinationals exist, where their competitive advantages come from, how do they overcome and compete with local competition, which is not that straightforward as we can imagine in their own setting of institutions. So the question now is what has happened in the last 10, 12 years or longer, or how does change unfold over time? And in a recent paper that I wrote with a colleague of mine, we have looked at this kind of a global top 10 lists, and we picked out one particular one which looks at market capitalization, and we like market capitalization because it factors in, it gives us a snapshot of a certain time, and it looks into the future because investors have their expectations and they look into the future and they assign their own expectations on return on investment on these companies. So if we compare two snapshots in terms of time, March 2009, here's a list of companies which, of course, they are very prominent and huge. We see very strongly invested in natural resources, telecommunication, retail, financial services, consumer goods, one technology firm, Microsoft, and healthcare. If we compare this list with approximately 10, 11 years later, or that is 9 years in that case, 9 years later, the ranking has changed completely. So now we see firms on top of this list, which are Apple and Alphabet, so the mother company of Google, Microsoft, Tencent, a Chinese technology firm, Facebook, and then consumer services, like Amazon, Alibaba. We don't see Walmart anymore being appreciated by investors that much. And then financial services and healthcare, Johnson & Johnson could remain on that list. But what we see here is that there is a definite change in terms of which companies, which type of companies are there. And it gives us a few ideas, a few thoughts about that we could hypothesize. Why did this happen? How did it happen? And what does it mean? And definitely on this list, we can see that technology has become a dominating driver for wealth creation. On the other side, we see business models which have become very sophisticated and are very focused on different wider stakeholder value and expectations. We see that economies of scale, which has been always very important, of course, have been seen a kind of a twist, because now we see, instead of economies of scale in production of energy products, we see this kind of economies of scale which refer to unit one cost. So basically, they create a technology which without any essential or without any major variable cost can create unlimited kind of products and services for the users of these services. And in tandem with these kind of economies of scale, we see that network economies have been become stronger and more important, creating demand side, increasing returns, and creating also what Trine was probably talking last week about the potential for ecosystems and the potential for ecosystems creating better value than companies doing their own thing and strategizing on a firm level solely. At the same time, we have seen that what we have, what we got used to in the last 20 years or so, that we see in many of the more globalized industries, globally oligopoly. So a few companies, usually four, taking usually more than 80% of the global market share in an industry. So this kind of picture with which most have been able to live very well has also changed and become a little bit, or at least it's going in the direction of a winner takes it all kind of a structure, competitive structure. So monopolistic advantages are created and concentrated in very few firms that cover a whole opportunity space. And they do this together with partner firms and in networks and in ecosystems. And that create a very powerful kind of actors, which have a great influence on not only on business today, but also trajectories into the future. And one example is the next one in the next paragraph here, is that makes governments increasingly nervous, I would say, that, or uncomfortable. And the case of Huawei and many states, many governments trying to limit Huawei's business in terms of expanding 5G networks. You know, and the rationale behind this has been, you know, discussed a lot in the media in the last couple of years. Of course, Donald Trump had a big role in vocalizing this kind of a mistrust. But of course, there's a very strong background resonating with this, that if Huawei, with their very long-term orientation and with their very resource-rich backup from the Chinese government, is able to actually create a monopoly in telecommunication technologies like 5G. So they will definitely, on a price base only, if that is the only criterion, they will kill their only two reasonable global competitor, which is Ericsson of Sweden and Nokia of Finland. So if this is allowed to happen, then it might really be so that we are facing not only important questions in terms of who is controlling or who has insights about the privacy issues and who can look into these kind of things, but it will also create completely new platforms for future technologies where future business models are based on, and they might be in very powerful hands of only one company, which is then again very closely governed or controlled by one particular government. And of course, this makes governments and people increasingly uncomfortable. On the other side, we see also contradictory behavior, just something I saw yesterday in the news, like Austria, because of the Corona situation, is in a full lockdown. Most of the shops are closed, and the Christmas business is coming, which usually is the majority of the revenues for most retailers, is creating most of the viability for retailers in Austria. So that's the Christmas business. And now that the Christmas business is seriously threatened and people move to online shopping and Amazon having a huge kind of a position in this field, there's a real and a realistic fear that many retail companies will go out of business, which is of course a possibility and okay, and this is happening, but it will also create a very powerful player who is acting globally and who is able to balance location advantages very well and also optimize things like taxes and employment and so on. So very, very important concerns that we have to deal with, that we see in this structural thing that is happening. So this leads me to a few questions that I will then hand over to Ilona to guide the discussion with the panel. But basically, if we look at the original three factors, so firm-specific advantages, ownership-specific advantages, the questions that we need to deal with or that we need to ponder on are really questions about what kind of organizational capabilities are needed to survive, to succeed internationally and locally. What kind of dynamic capabilities need to be invested in to create resilience, and what kind of positions do firms really want to take in their ecosystems, in international global ecosystems? What kind of positions do they need to take, and then how, again, does this influence the organizational capabilities and resources they need to build up and need to obtain? In regard to location choices, I see a little bit of a shift here from purely looking at location as a geographical thing, but maybe looking into locations more as an opportunity space with partnerships, alliances in an ecosystem kind of thing. So if I join an ecosystem, my business model, my strategy might be very cooperation oriented. while at the same time the ecosystem as such might be very competitive with other ecosystems. In the spirit of a winner takes it all, the idea to create a global monopoly in the long run. So that is one thing where maybe partially the location specific advantage question will more change into an opportunity space, and who do I join, which ecosystems do I need to join? And then the third one is internalization, or the question of how do I govern and how do I control my international operations? Like if we go back a few decades, it was natural for multinational enterprises to do this through ownership. So you acquire assets, and then the ownership of these assets would be the government's very simple or very effective governance mechanism. Now, if we go into this more ecosystem kind of approach, where we look into different companies cooperating, the question will be, what kind of a means of and forms of control do we want to build? How do they go beyond markets and hierarchies, and what needs to be taken care of? What kind of technologies will enable all these kind of things? So we are looking here at the question of what kind of interdependencies, and most likely very asymmetric interdependencies in ecosystems, does the firm need to take into account to stay alive in the long run? And with these words, I would like to hand back to Ilona and engage the esteemed panel to share their views on these interesting topics with us. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Peter. I think you have to stop sharing your presentation. Yes, really was a lot of very interesting thoughts. So I will introduce the panel now, and then I will give a word to each of the panelists to introduce themselves and to comment on Peter's presentations, if any comments would be there. So today in our panel, we have Alesander Kelberg, founder and CEO of Groglass. If you could switch on the camera and show yourself. Yeah.
Trying to do that, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Then we have Rolando Delgado, who is Business Development Manager at MGI.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. We have Rihards Gailums, who is CEO and founder of Pilot Automotive Labs.
I'm switched off somehow, I guess.
You should switch on the camera.
No, I mean, I'm switched off by the administrator, I think. Oh, yes, no. Yeah. Hi.
Hi. And last but not the least, we have Lauma Muižniece, Head of Innovation Technology Department at Investment and Development Agency of Latvia.
Hi.
Hi, Lauma. Yeah. Yeah, so I will give a floor to each of you to present yourself, to introduce yourself, and to give some overview about your organization. How is it involved in internationalization issues, and to comment on Peter's presentation. So maybe we can start with Richard.
Yeah, hi everyone. So my name is Rihards Gailums. I'm CEO and founder of a company called Pilot Automotive Labs. So probably I'll just share the screen and show what we're doing. So we are kind of international technology startup. We're not really a corporation or company. We are technology startup started by the Latvian founders, but we are an American company. So we are based in Portland, Oregon, at least until last year before the COVID. But I moved back to Latvia like a year ago, and we're building the different automotive solutions for autonomy, safety, and connectivity. So a couple of projects we got in Hong Kong. Here's a customer for the Hong Kong project, and this is actually done converted car for the Intel labs in Portland, Oregon. and we are doing a couple of military-based European ground military-based pilot projects here in Latvia too. So, but in particular, particularly, I think in this concern of today's discussion, might be interesting the side project of the pilot automotive labs called Woodpecker, and it's actually something like international community-based open source vehicle platform project for environmentally friendly vehicle, which dealing with global environmental issues like pollutions and CO2 emission. And I started this project actually as open source and faced to the different logistical and let's say business building problems or look for solutions. And then until then, until this point, we have been building interesting ecosystems approach, like since it should be international, so we're looking for presence in every country, every region, and that's why we're looking for different logistics, logistical solutions for the producing and distributing the whole kit or car to different parts of the world. And that's why particularly we're looking for different strategies how to move the car to the different points of the planet. And there's historically different strategies like knockdown kits in automotive industry and something like that. But we are also thinking how to start manufacturing and building the parts in every part of the world. And this is actually how we end up with a very complex organizational structure, which is a combination of non-profit and profit organization. Probably if someone is interested in that. But there, we found out that there's different cultures and different cultural problems how to start this wooden car project in different parts of the world. So we got the conversation with China, for example, and we understood that probably they don't have even wood, because we thought that wooden car could be produced there everywhere, but we found out that, for example, China doesn't have wood, and we should import wood from Latvia to China. So that's kind of interesting acknowledgement for us. So I think it's all from my side from beginning.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Richard. Yeah, so I would give a floor to Sasha Kelberg. Could you introduce yourself and Groglass and some aspects of internationalization, please?
Sure. Groglass is a manufacturing company. We were founded in 2004, also out of, you can call it an ecosystem. There was an institute from the Soviet times which focused on aerospace and defense sector called Sidrabe, and the fund that I worked for had ownership of that institute, and we looked for a technology that we could take inside of that institute and commercialize. So instead of making a machine and selling it to someone, we would buy the machine itself, the technology, and we would manufacture products in Latvia. In essence, where we operate now is we make anti-reflective glass. The sample behind me has two glasses, and one is invisible. So what we do is we take the reflection away from the glass. And the main use is picture framing, like what you see above that sample, that application. And then another big usage is commercial refrigerators for supermarkets for better visibility of products, as well as electronic displays, indoor and outdoor. And then we have plenty of niche products, but those three make up the bulk of what we sell. We sell to over 45 countries around the world. So 99% of our products are exported. We are a pretty dominant player now. We came out to the European market with 5 competitors. Today we have almost 80% of the European market in picture framing, and then we are #1 in commercial refrigerators as well. So we were able to not only break into good export market, but also to dominate it. What can I say? There are very interesting things in the presentation, something about, of course, clusters, but unfortunately we are the only ones doing what we're doing here in Latvia, so that is not as relevant, but we will get into the benefits of Latvia, I think, in the next question.
Yes, indeed. Thanks a lot. And Lauma, could you introduce yourself from a state governance perspective?
Sure. So good morning once again. Yes, I'm from the Investment and Development Agency of Latvia, and of course, internationalization, different aspects of internationalization play quite a big role in the agency's day-to-day life and the overall agenda. Because what we're doing, but in a somewhat broader sense, because we're working with companies and trying to find different ways how to support development of different kind of skills and competencies and build competitive advantages so that companies would be able to compete in international markets. And we're working with exports, foreign direct investments, tourism, as well as technological development. So this is another area that the agency has been quite active in, well, I would say, more active in the last couple of years. We have been supporting and facilitating cross-border knowledge and technology transfer. And of course, we see it firsthand how sometimes difficult and challenging it is to align the domestic needs in these areas and the domestic needs of the companies in these areas, and with the support incentives available, because a lot of things are defined on a much broader scale, on much on a supranational scale, and then we have to find ways how to sort of find the right match here domestically. Between what is available and what is actually needed, and in the sense that not only what is available in terms of funding or activities that are funded, but also the competencies or collaboration opportunities that are available. For example, the skills that are coming from universities, and whether these or services that are coming from universities, or the research that is up for commercialization, whether that is something that local companies in fact are looking for, or this is something that should be commercialized internationally. So this is the kind of things that we also deal in our everyday in our everyday activities.
Okay, thanks a lot. And then I'll give a floor to Rolando.
Hi everyone, my name is Rolando Delgado. As I was introduced by Ilona, I am working at MGI as a business development manager. So basically we are a company which operates in a rather interesting field, genome sequencing, or also called genomics in many cases as well. And we're a company that produces instruments and machines for genome sequencing research. Basically, that's in simple words speaking, that's a machine that helps to read human genome or DNA, not just human, but also plants, animals, and any kind of genetic research can be conducted with the help of these instruments. Additionally, we produce also our own reagents and consumables to run these machines. And now, during this year with the COVID situation, we are also switching our focus on automation instruments, and these instruments can help laboratories to greatly expand their testing capacities. And actually, yeah, listening to Peter's presentation, there were lots of words and terms which stuck in my mind. So we are clearly an example of a multinational or a growing multinational company which has relocated to Latvia, because our headquarters is based in Shenzhen, China. And in Latvia, we have developed our, European headquarters, and we plan to produce these machines here. We plan to produce reagents here, but we also run a very large genetic sequencing laboratory here to be able to benefit of the local ecosystem, which in this case is European researchers, European Research Area, Horizon projects, etc. And actually, yeah, it was quite clear that in this industry, the non-equity mode or approach was becoming even more and more difficult, shipping instruments from China, traveling engineers who need to repair or install these instruments. So we decided, why not do it here on the European level? So we are growing very fast here in Europe. And obviously, we also hope very much that we create positive spillover effects by generating some sort of a biotech cluster, or at least accelerating the growth of this kind of cluster here in Latvia. Thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for your introduction. So let's start with the questions. And then my first question would go to Sasha. So what was the main reason to locate your business in Latvia, apart of course, you live here, but how does Latvia as a location helps to leverage some competitive advantage or some capabilities of your company, if somehow?
Yeah, if we speak about the choice, I think here we just come to the realization that you don't choose your parents and you don't choose the company, the place where you perhaps start. So it wasn't we started because Sidrobe was here, and we looked for technologies in it. At the time, we contemplated that, maybe because our original market was in Holland, we thought maybe instead of taking the glass across Europe and across the world, it would be better for us to locate in Holland. But we quickly realized that technology is really the key. And then in any entrepreneurial environment, in any startup environment, of course, location being close to the organization, speaking to your people, I think it outweighs the benefits of spending a few euros on transportation. Latvia, in the beginning, I think it gave us a huge advantage. Besides being the home of the technology that was at the heart of our operation, it allowed us, I think, to fly under the radar for quite a long time. Nobody took us seriously. I think our markets were in Western Europe, and our main competitors were German, Swiss, Danish, and American. And frankly, when we would come to distributors saying that we are going to have this type of product, we didn't get a chance to even open our mouth, because nobody thought that Latvia or ex-Soviet space would be a home place of technology. This was back 2004, perhaps this has changed, but this is my personal experience. Now and the same was for competitors. So this was a big advantage, because once we were out with the product, which was better than our competitors and more attractive in terms of price, it was too late for them. We were able to gain the market share very quickly. So the flying under the radar really helped. Then on the other side, Latvia is, as we all know, is a fantastic place to be and to visit and to live. And very quickly, when we would get our partners and customers to Latvia, we quickly saw that it's a European place, which has great values, and it's modern, and it's super pleasant to visit. So we would get a lot of customers who would be coming here. I think we shouldn't underestimate that. I mean, these are small things that are important, but if we were in the middle of the frozen tundra, we wouldn't get that many visitors and customers coming here. And this is it's a positive thing to be in a place that is just so nice and pleasant to live. I think that it helped us to grow not because again, the clusters here, because we do have to educate every single worker that we take from zero. No one in Latvia does what we do, and it's a very specific and it's very technical. But eventually, we are able to tap into the very highly educated workforce. These are things that often kept being repeated by the government officials, but they're true. Our workforce is very educated. Unfortunately, many of them left, but now many are realizing that it's, again, a super nice place to live, and they're coming back. People speak languages, people quick to learn. It's important for the customers to be able to speak with someone who is, outgoing and pleasant and is able to speak without an accent. And it's also important for R&D partners to be able to speak the science and speak at a very high level of education. So, of course, our ports shouldn't be underestimated for a manufacturing business like ours. It's important for us to be in the middle of everything and be able to ship our products across the world very easily. I think I'm not really breaking any new ground on things that we already know, but these are important things, and I think it's important to realize them and not underestimate them and appreciate them, because this does give us advantage to be in a place where we are. I mean, let's look at the past 6 months, relatively how we have weathered the COVID storm compared to many other developed countries. The lockdowns were not as severe. The people, wearing masks is not politicized, and it's. I mean, these are all great things, and that allowed us to, I think, come out and on top during this after this crisis, and due to our location.
Okay, yeah, thanks a lot. And Rihards, what is your opinion? Because your business also is truly multinational with different locations, and you might have maybe more critical view on Latvia as a location. Or...
I don't want to be more critical, but in our specific market for vehicle manufacturing, Latvia is not the best place actually to start business, because we don't have the serious vehicle or car manufacturing heritage of the country, or knowledge, or something unique. So, and access to the funding and money or clients actually is very critically low, I think. So that's the reason why we started business by moving out from the Latvia like 4 years ago. And we took approach that we follow the money. So we actually were open to move to any country which could provide us initial funding for our startup at the time. So we started business in Singapore, by the way. So we've been backed by the Singapore government acceleration program. So that's how we started the company in Singapore. By the way, so we faced a lot of problems in particular country because there's very expensive cars to import, and we couldn't afford to buy any test cars. And we understood that Singapore also is not the best place where to start the automotive business. And then we moved to Hong Kong, because in Hong Kong, by the way, is by the strange reason, one of the car manufacturing headquarters called Infinity by Nissan. And they moved to Hong Kong, this headquarters, because of China proximity. So I spent like 3-4 months actually to try to develop the automotive business in Hong Kong. And we've been actually little bit misguided by the opportunity of the venture capital in Hong Kong, or in Asia particularly. So we found out that the private venture capital actually is very underdeveloped in Hong Kong at the time. So we couldn't raise any more money or make some kind of start production. But we found out one important thing, that that proximity to China allow us to very short term to get parts from for our R&D job necessary vehicle parts, which is mostly produced in China, just across the border in Shenzhen. So we just start a couple of projects based on Hong Kong Science Park, and get deliveries of the parts very fast. And next step in our development that was we moved to the United States, because we get funding from Jaguar Land Rover, which surprisingly built their research and development center out of England in Portland, Oregon, in the United States. So we get first funding there, some serious funding for research and development, and we moved to the United States. So I mean, location for us wasn't any, and moved new location. It wasn't difficult decision actually, because at that time before COVID, the Earth was flat, so you could move almost into any country of the world and start your startup business. So, and in the United States, there's a couple of positive things in our case, because there's a very short delivery time for the parts from American market or from China market. Actually, we could get the parts like in 3-4 days, not waiting for 1 month and then go to the custom process, which is actually here in Latvia. So this is kind of not very beneficial for a hardware car manufacturing company. And after the COVID started, so we get a couple of, we are not a manufacturing company. We are more an R&D company with workshops in the United States right now in Portland, here in my motherland in Latvia. So I moved back before COVID, and actually right now the market is down. So transportation sector, investment sector is particularly down. So we're looking for waiting for a little bit better times right now. But I can't get even back to our workshop in the United States because of lockdown. So that's the reason I'm staying here, and almost more than 1 year. And we're start looking for different development perspectives here locally for grounds, governmental grounds. And surprisingly, we found out that there's a lot of them in particular right now. So, and we end up with some sort of environmental grant from the Latvias valsts measure, which is actually the Latvian state forestry, for this woodpecker project development. So, and we start our activities in R&D here this year. So I believe that the COVID probably will end up soon, probably in the middle of the next year. So it could move freely across the world to the different regions. But right now, I think we kind of stuck here, and then we should look to the funding and business opportunities here, which is probably not very good in terms of how to get the customers or how to sell our stuff, because European market or Latvian market even doesn't exist for our project, and European market is not the core market. So we should figure out the logistics problems, how to bring our product to the different parts of the world, starting from Brazil to United States or China. And but yeah, that's how I see the situation now for us.
Okay, thanks a lot for depicting the situation from your perspective. So I would have a question to Lauma. So how does Latvian institutional environment ensures that firms like Groglass and pilot labs can compete internationally, and what are some possibilities available for them?
Thank you. Well, I would say that currently much of the ability to compete internationally probably lies also very much in the ability to develop skills and competences, and the ability to innovate and absorb different kind of knowledge spillovers from not only from local research organizations, but also research organizations abroad, other companies abroad, different kind of collaboration partners, and so on and so forth. And being able, of course, to not only get the knowledge, but also to be able to use it, to absorb it. And I think overall developing and fostering the national innovation system in Latvia with all its elements has been, and it is still crucial, and a lot has been done in the sense, but there is still a lot of potential for future development. I mean, and there is a lot of challenges still that we have to overcome, because innovation is a path-dependent process, and well, nothing is without some challenges. But what we have done so far, I think, is we have done some really good things, such as, for example, Latvia has defined the smart specialization framework and defined smart specialization areas to allocate funding, for example, and there are grants for research for these areas. There are, I mean, grants for research for both companies and research organizations, and also for collaborative projects, for joint projects. There's also non-financial support, so that companies and also universities can develop different kind of skills, and also foster collaborations and find collaboration partners, integrate in different kind of international consortia, write projects together. So there's a lot of things going on. Also, there's I would say, to find the best approach, experimentation is also taking place, because, as I already mentioned before, for a small country, it's especially crucial to find the balance between meeting these domestic needs and also to be able to integrate within international value chains. And of course, this is particularly important again when we talk about research and technological development and tech-intensive companies. But of course, while there is a lot in place already, so there's the legislation is addressed, different kind of support incentives, policies are being developed, stakeholders are being heard out, and different kind of experimentation with possible solutions is being done, there's still a lot. I mean, a lot relies on the user friendliness of these support mechanisms, and also I would say that there in some cases there is quite a lot of fragmentation. Also, when we talk about different kind of support incentives, so there is a lot is available, but the question is how easy sometimes it is to use it, and how easy it is to get the information about the opportunities that are out there, because that's quite crucial. Because sometimes a lot of opportunities go unused just because sometimes we don't know where to look for the information, and or we might have the impression that these are not concerning us, or that these might be too difficult for us to implement, or in fact they are too difficult for us to implement. So there still is, I think, quite a potential to establish different kind of platforms to communicate between stakeholders, to really synchronize and understand each other's needs, and to think how to improve the process, so it we can develop the national innovation system as effective as possible.
Okay, thanks a lot. Are there some comments from your side so far to what has been said? Or maybe Peter? Yeah.
From my side,
yeah.
Or
yeah, just commenting on what each other said, because this.
Yeah. Of course, I think there's a lot of challenges or issues that different companies face. They of course differ from an industry to industry. They're sector specific, they're location specific. But I would say the recent developments and have shown have highlighted some important issues. I think, for example, that companies have to think. Well, we have talked a lot that everyone, not only companies but governments, have to think strategically and in a longer term. But this shows that it's quite impossible to think also in a longer term, because things are changing really rapidly. So maybe what we have to think about is to implement. To ensure that there is the flexibility to actually adapt and reflect to the changes that are happening. So maybe we don't have to look that far in the future ahead, but build the skill to be able to adapt and react in a fast manner, right? So that is one thing I think this shows. Also in terms, of course, for the government, because this applies to both companies and the government. The government has to be flexible and fast to create the environment where companies can also overcome their difficulties when such challenges arise globally. So I think this is definitely something that should be taken into account. And of course, uncertainties this just adds another even more extreme level of uncertainty in an already uncertain sector. Like tech-intensive businesses are always dealing with huge amounts of uncertainty. So this is definitely not helping. But I guess it's what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. But yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Peter, maybe you have comment on what has been said before, like from your perspective.
Yeah, I think they were very interesting contributions to this discussion, and maybe to start with Lauma, what you said, I think very, very interesting from a government's perspective, government agencies perspective, who is in charge of helping firms to internationalize. I've been working for a few years together with Finnvera in Finland on a project, and Finnvera is the kind of export credit agency of Finland. So it's giving out guarantees and also has a little bit of a loan, like a banking function, but mainly guarantees. And I think what you said is really one of the major things in terms of these kind of agencies to create or to reduce uncertainty, right? That is what we all wish to have less. And I think even the COVID situation is a good example that governments who, even without having all the different information at hand that what is the best way to deal with the situation, it is anyway better to make a decision and go with it because you create more planning certainty at least, you know. And we see that that this is definitely something which I think what you are telling sounds very good, and I see that the Finnish government agencies they are doing very similar things, partially very well. They are moving also more together. You know, we had like many different agencies for different parts of the internationalization challenges, and now we see that they have basically been over the last few years bringing them together under the same roof, literally. You know, so they are now in the same building. They share the same offices, and it's becoming more of a common understanding of what is the role of finance, what is the role of market information, what is the role of technology development, and then how does this all come together. So I think government has a big role, especially for small open economies, you know, like Finland is, Latvia is, extremely crucial. And on the other side, it's also like, if I think of Finvera, you know, I mean, they are giving out, they have up to 70 billion in terms of, like their room for giving guarantees out is 70 billion. And this is mainly to companies which are very strong and big multinationals in solution business kind of fields, like Nokia, of course, with their networks, or Wärtsilä with their power plants, or Valmet or Andritz with their pulp and paper type of industries, and there the role of government cannot be underestimated, actually. You know, also the discussion or the point I mentioned with Huawei, like OECD countries, they have an understanding of how a government can support a local firm. And they have a kind of arrangement, they call it, the arrangement in terms of creating even level playing field. So you're not supposed to help your companies with subsidiaries, but you're supposed to create a more even way of competing with each other. And most or all OECD countries subscribe to this kind of a regulatory, which is quite informal, of course. But then again, China is not an OECD country, so they are not adhering to the same rules. They are not in the same mechanisms in how different countries look at the support government is giving to their companies. And I think this is a very interesting thing. And I think the 5G kind of problematic with Huawei is one that illustrates this very well, that other countries, governments are following certain rules, and China is making their own rules. And of course, they are so getting every day more powerful that they can do this. So I think government has definitely a big role. And I'm sometimes a bit disappointed that the EU, you know, which could be the most powerful, or at least they could be extremely powerful in determining these things, that they're not finding a common voice in terms of how to do this properly, in terms of the global competitive field, and even the geopolitical and the trade kind of policies. You know, there will always be Germany and France and then other interests, and very difficult to deal with what we are seeing also there in terms of these big powerful actors like China getting more and more powerful every day. Then again, of course, most of your companies are medium-sized companies, so that is very interesting. And I found the story fascinating, that you said location is not so relevant in terms of the automotive startup kind of thing. But then again, it was actually giving you the reason to move around the world, Singapore and Hong Kong, and then the US, and then back. It was purely based on seeking location advantages and trying out how you could fit into this kind of environment, which is very, very interesting. I think very interesting story. And then you know, then we have a Chinese company, right, Rolando? So the headquarters of your company is in China, but the European headquarters are in Latvia. It's a very interesting choice. We have here Elma, which is an American company, and you know they have basically one of their main units in Finland for their medical instruments, and so it's a very very interesting. How do you see the future of Chinese the medical device industry? Is it going to compete, outcompete these kind of companies like Elma and GE and so on?
Well, we're in a rather very specific industry, the genomics industry. So basically there is just a handful of competitors that we have worldwide who are our direct competitors. But since we're growing very, very fast, obviously it will switch more from like a kind of a monopoly by our main competitor, which is an American company, to more of an oligopoly type of situation. But clearly, yes, the idea of us being here is to integrate more with the European Union and to follow the rules, because in the genetic research industry, data protection is also super sensitive topic, especially with the European GDPR regulations. So for us, the only way how we could participate in this kind of research is to be physically present here. I mean, to participate without generating like further concerns or so, because we have to follow all the local regulations and it is very strictly enforced. And our company takes it very seriously as well.
Thanks. Yeah, I also have some questions to Rolando. So why Latvia? Why MGI chose Latvia for its location?
This is actually a rather interesting story, but I would also agree that the points are aligned. Well, I would agree with what Sasha said, that the government mentioned several points, such as Latvia being a cost competitive location, good geographical location, etc. These points are very true in our case as well, at least the far majority of them. And for MGI, I was very involved myself with helping MGI to choose Latvia, because at the time I was also working at Latvian Investment and Development Agency, so I was kind of their first contact here. And of course, at that time we wanted to demonstrate all of the best sides of Latvia, but everything checked out because, well, the local traditions and already existing knowledge of the life science field in general is actually very strong in Latvia, and that was clearly an advantage against the other countries which were considered. And of course, coming back to the basics, cost competitiveness is really actually an important point, because well, for example, we have a sister company in Denmark working already for some time, and it is quite difficult to expand the operation in Denmark due to rather high costs in comparison with Latvia. So here we are able to afford to have a 7,500 square meter facility. Do the same thing in Germany or in France or wherever in West, it would cost twice as much. Salaries, of course, is also a factor. So basically the price performance ratio in terms of cost competitiveness is fantastic here, because the labor pool, the specialists are well educated. Of course, we need to teach a lot of things ourselves, and because we operate in such a specific industry, but that would be the case almost anywhere. So obviously government support is very important, and we continue to see that the government's role is really big in these kinds of choices, because, yeah, well, I could also maybe praise LIAA for the proactive and fast responses, like with the Belarusian case recently, when LIAA was inviting proactively the companies to transfer their business to Latvia. But that's just an example to demonstrate that Latvia, while being a relatively small economy, is showing eagerness to get these high-tech companies here. And it was also the case for MGI. There were other countries considered, such as Poland, for example, the same Denmark and some other countries. But Latvia showed a clear eagerness to have these kinds of companies here. It was a lot of work to do, but eventually lots of pieces of the puzzle fell into place. We found a fantastic location really next to the Riga International Airport. So for a company operating in the industry of genetics, shipping reagents, shipping biological samples, it could be no better place than to be physically close to the airport. And we have shipping companies in our neighbors, as our neighbors, basically, like our partners, DHL, like to joke that we are the only partner which they can visit coming by foot, because we're basically like 300 meters away. So yeah, there were a lot of these kinds of factors, and basically Latvia is a very good entrance point into the European Union market, but also well connected and has established channels to CIS countries. Lots of Russian-speaking people make it easier to do business with Russia and other countries in the East. Developed infrastructure, and of course political stability even could be a factor, because we can see that in many countries this is becoming also an issue, but here it's thankfully it's rather it's rather calm to be here right now. So yeah, there were lots of reasons why Latvia was chosen, and we're quite happy about this choice, and we continue to grow very fastly here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks a lot. So I have some more questions to all of you. So, and one thing is that indeed it seems that Latvia is quite good location for businesses, for international businesses. So one question would be, what is the main points that you are missing here, like from your business development perspective? And the other question is how COVID is changing the rules of the game, and what's some new developments you see for some opportunities or threats for your business? Maybe we can start with Sasha.
Sure. I'll start with COVID, and I think it depends on how the companies spent this time. Of course, not everybody perhaps had a comfort of a cash cushion to think about the future. Perhaps people were reacting, but if companies spent this time really preparing for the future, really reinventing their businesses, I mean, even physically, we're not traveling. The whole team is here. We can brainstorm all day long how to best position ourselves for the future. So for us, it's been a very productive time and exciting. So, of course, it comes with a downside of the business being down and us trying to figure out what to do next. But I think we faced many crises in the past, and it's been all about pivoting, and it will require us to pivot again. That's what I would say. So I think it's a time of opportunity, even to think about our markets, picture framing. We've thought, that this would help our business, but then physically many shops were closed for a while as non-essential businesses. However, thinking back, we've spent so much time at home staring at our empty walls. People dusted off their old photos. People dusted off their things that they want to frame, and the business started to boom as soon as the shops opened. We see that. So out of crisis, really, there's always an opportunity. So, so we do have some good forward thinking in terms of our business, even after COVID, during COVID as well.
Okay, thanks. And if you could maybe briefly also comment the other question on some, let's say, disadvantages of being located in Latvia.
On one side, where we have enjoyed the sort of good athlete approach to workers here. There are people, but they still need to be trained. Of course, we struggle in finding people who have a very multinational approach. Most of the professionals who work in Latvia, and I'm generalizing now, but they work for the Latvian market. They work for a multinational into the Latvian market, and they, if you work in marketing, if you work in sales, it's a quite different task to do research on the Latvian level versus when the world is your oyster. So when you need to really look out and be comfortable in the multinational market. So we are hoping for more people. Hopefully they will come from the people who come back, who have the multinational view of the world, are comfortable traveling, are comfortable analyzing foreign markets, and not only within the Latvian mindset.
Okay, yeah, thanks a lot. Richard, could you comment on the COVID opportunities and threats, and on the other hand, some disadvantages of Latvia?
Yeah, actually, I would like to add one more thing, which was very important, how Latvia helped us to develop the project. So since we were American company, we tried to access military contracts, military automation contracts in the United States. And we found out that since we're founders, all founders of company are Latvian based, so we can't access legally to American military grants and projects. So the solution was quite simple. That was the reason why we started the company here in Latvia, sister company, the same founders. And Latvia, since Latvia is a NATO member, so we were able to qualify for the military grants here in Latvia. So that means that if we build this some sort of prototypes here, and since it's inside the NATO, so we could move back to our American company and try to sell there. So that's kind of strange competitive advantage of Latvia in this case. And in terms of the disadvantages of the Latvia, I get 6 of them for us. So first is delivery of parts. In this case, I mean logistics delivery. So I mean we got very slow custom, not very, but slow custom system for delivery time of the goods from China or from United States. So it's very expensive, very slow in comparison to being located in China or United States. We don't have here access to the funding in our industry, and the all stuff which Latvian Investment Agency actually have now is not very appropriate for our case. It's too complicated or too not effective to use our time and efforts to try to get some of the tools which we have here. So, and then access to the market. So from here, it's very difficult to access the global markets for automotive industry products, which we are focusing on. Logistics problem. I mean, it's very easy to ship the vehicle inside America. I mean, it's very easy and very cost effectively move the car across all the United States, but it's almost impossible to move the car from here to any parts of the world. So it means we don't have a presence of the effective low-cost logistic companies here for our business, and we don't have industry history here in Latvia. We of course got some sort of automotive factories and plant like Rafs and other one, but that was engineers and workers with previous very old generation. So we don't have any considerable benefits from experienced workers here right now. And 6th problem with Latvia is actually that we don't have access to local engineering talents. So our educational system is preparing more or less managers right now, still preparing managers, not designers, not engineers. So the Riga Technical University, for example, in car manufacturing, in car transportation, this faculty teaching students how to maintain cars, not to build them. So if we would like to find out engineer who could design the suspension of the car from scratch, it's really complicated. So we should go to Germany or to even India right now, which is booming in terms of the automotive engineering education. Yeah. So, and in terms of the COVID, it's completely changed all the landscape. So most of the projects are stopped. Automation, transportation sectors are down. Investors actually are very pessimistic to the all automation and transportation stuff. So, but from other side, it's still environmental issues are very hot right now. COVID, of course, is now hotter problem than global warming, for example, but they're still competing in terms of importance. And we see that in China, there's a lot of possibilities to move our environmentally based projects actually right now because of the buzz of the environmental stuff across the world. And COVID actually opened the mindset of the Chinese businesses inside China, how to look outside the borders of their country or their production limits or traditions.
Hey, yeah, thanks a lot. And before I will give a floor to Lauma, I will also, of course, ask any one of you to give any comments or considerations, but I will also encourage our audience to write questions in a chat form, because we have last 10 minutes of our discussion, and then we might not be able to address questions if you will post them on the last moment. Okay, but then, yeah, Lauma, could you comment?
Yes, so of course it has been challenging for also for us in kind of from two aspects. So one is for the government itself and for LIAA as a government agency, but also for our clients, the companies, and also research organizations, because of course we are also thinking of how to minimize the impact to them. And I would say this has been challenging in the sense that, but it has also showed opportunities, and I think this is something that can be there is a potential, and this can be used to further improve different kind of things. Is that this has been challenging in the terms of having frequent conversations face to face with our stakeholders, with our clients, because being the ability to discuss things on the spot or have to participate together in different kind of events, it gives you the opportunity to innovate a bit faster, to come to conclusions a bit faster. However, at the moment, what we see now, and it's important for us also when we think about implementing different kind of new mechanisms. For example, now we're implementing or working on implementing this so-called value chain ecosystem approach, where we try to have frequent conversations with the companies from within some specific value chains. And of course, it's not that easy to do this online all the time, right? So there is this element of being together that is missing. However, it shows that we have to be very creative and open and really have a conversation, and because we still have to channel the issues that our clients are facing to other government organizations. So we have to talk with them. We have to be able to also provide different kind of appropriate mechanisms of how to solve these issues. And I think, well, of course, one other thing that I think companies could think about is not only use the opportunities to regain their competitive advantage or improve it if they're running into problems at the moment. That also there's a lot of opportunities available, but it's quite important to also look for them. And of course, our role in this is to make it easy to understand this information. And also, I would be very happy to hear that all the instruments are perfect and appropriate for everyone. But of course, our role and our duty is to explain this to companies and try to make it as easy as possible for them to use. Other things, I think this has been time for to reconsider a lot of things and reconsider how businesses are taking place. And well, I think of course this is quite difficult for especially when we talk about technological development. But I think this is something that we can also solve. These issues that we are facing right now, these are issues that we can actually solve by using different kind of state-of-the-art technology. So I think there's a silver lining to everything. yeah, I think that's more or less from my side.
Okay, thanks a lot. And again, if any comments, feel free. But otherwise, I would give floor to Rolando addressing these questions.
Yeah, well, regarding the COVID situation, actually it changed a great deal of business for MGI because we were mainly focusing on the field of genome sequencing and all of these kind of related studies. And we wanted for this to generate quite a high value for Europe and for Latvia because genome sequencing basically is one of the cornerstones of precision medicine. And as we know, precision medicine is basically the future of healthcare. And with MGI's presence in Latvia, so we had the chance to become one of the leaders also in this field on a European scale. But starting from when the COVID situation started, we needed to rapidly switch our focus from these efforts to automation instruments, because the automation instruments that we produce initially, they were more like a supplementary instrument to make the sequencing part easier, faster, and to be able to handle more samples more efficiently. But as it happens, these instruments are also very good in extracting viral DNA and RNA, so they can be used by laboratories to do COVID testing. And that's why we switched the focus more on these instruments, and they were sold very rapidly across Europe already during the first wave. The second wave, the situation is also now the same, so we couldn't even switch back to the genetic sequencing part entirely. To give a short, like an example, for example, one kind of automation machine could extract viral RNA from 192 samples in 80 minutes fully automatically. So that's really lots of help for this kind of laboratory. So if you combine these kinds of instruments together, for example, in the United Arab Emirates, we had a partnership with G42, and where MGI built a laboratory within 2 weeks. I think that was in April. And also MGI's automation instruments were installed there. So the combination enabled to achieve a 10,000 testing capacity of testing for 10,000 tests per day. And these kinds of capacities is what we're also now installing in Europe, and also offering for Latvia to take advantage of these opportunities and to help to lessen the burden on the laboratory technicians here. So basically, yeah, we needed to switch very rapidly to this direction when COVID happened. So that was, well, I also remember there was a question about what is something that we need or lack in Latvia. Probably, well, it is a bit difficult for us to balance because since our headquarters is located in China, the speed of producing things in China obviously is much different than here. When you have locally a large number of producers of whatever, they can produce things fast. If we need to produce things in Europe, then it's much more difficult because we usually need to order supplies and parts from different countries. And especially in our industry, everything is nearly tailor-made, so it cannot be done fast. So that would be something like a difficulty that we need to kind of balance these two business mindsets and availability of resources and the logistics speeds. But on the second hand, if we build things in China, it's obviously much more difficult and more expensive to ship. The customs and all of that kind of things increase the costs. If we build it here for the European market or realize any projects here, we can basically do next day deliveries for certain clients, or it's just a matter of days. So there are some pluses and some minuses, of course, in this regard as well. So our difficult task is to find the right balance between both of them, and also it's a lot of work on the cultural balance in this regard, because expectations and reality may differ from what can be done here, what can be done in China, and vice versa.
Okay, thanks a lot. So we have 1 minute left. So are there some concluding remarks or comments? Or I see audience is not very active in terms of questions, but is there maybe something that you would like to address? Okay. Okay. If not, then do we have a question in the chat, or no, there's something else? Okay, then I really would like to thank you all for participating in this discussion. I hope it was also interesting for each of you to hear these comments and to address your position. And we will continue next week at the same time with the seminar on career transformation. And the keynote speaker will be Anita Gaile, but that seminar will be in Latvian. Okay, so indeed, thanks a lot to each of you, and yeah, see you later. And thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.